history of America has seen moments of extreme polarization. This is one of those moments.
The man is not a leader. He could not lead the United States across the Brooklyn Bridge.
It's about how people feel, right? If this coronavirus passes and the stock market is doing well and unemployment is low, people are feeling great going into that, I think Donald Trump wins.
And that is what will bring down Donald Trump. His conduct is just so untoward the office of the presidency.
Presidents lose elections when they look incompetent and when they look out of touch.
From the Zoomerplex in historic Liberty Village, the Zoomer with Marissa Lennox.
Welcome to the Zoomer. I'm Marissa Lennox. On today's show, what the coronavirus and the corresponding market crash means for Donald Trump's presidency. And later, the stage is set for Biden versus Trump. But can he defeat the incumbent president? At the roundtable, we have political pundits of various stripes ready to debate. But before we dive in, let's tee up the topic.
The coronavirus has become a highly politicized election year issue. In a recent survey, Democrats were more than 3 times as likely to be very concerned about the virus than Republicans. And twice as many Democrats as Republicans said the coronavirus poses an imminent threat. In the meantime, Wall Street has taken a nosedive, even coming to a halt for 15 minutes. The media are eager to call it quits for the president, with headlines that read, Trump's minimized view of the coronavirus puts his re-election at risk, and the coronavirus is coming for Trump's presidency. Still, Trump continues to lead his top Democratic rivals in his bid for a second term. Bye. So, will it be 4 more years of Trump, or could Democrats take back the White House with the oldest president, or a return to the politics of President Obama?
So, Conrad, finest hour or biggest threat?
Well, certainly it's the biggest threat because the Russian collusion thing, although it attracted and held people's attention for years, was a complete fraud. And the impeachment case was also a joke. It was farcical. He was accused of things that are not crimes, and there was no evidence that he committed the offenses, alleged offenses that he was accused of. This is a real illness, and it is a real threat. It could be a fine hour. It just depends how he handles it. He has, in general, been somebody who's handled times of great tension very well. For example, during the campaign, when the Hollywood Access Billy Bush tape came out, it looked like his campaign had sunk. He was very cool-headed, and he actually won the debate against Hillary Clinton. But we've got to see. I mean, if he flounders around and the public get the impression that they're not being protected properly and not being told frankly and clearly what's happening with a plan of action of how to deal with it, he could be in real difficulties. But I would guess he is a competent executive. He's the only serious businessman who's ever held that position. And I think this group assembled around the vice president is very strong. So I assume they'll do a competent job of it.
I would disagree with that. I don't believe that the American public, from what I can see just getting back from the States, that anybody trusts this guy. That's the problem is you don't know what's coming out of the White House. I remember a statement last week where he said the coronavirus will probably decline in terms of the weather getting warmer. I mean, I thought that was such there's so much mistrust.
But what if the coronavirus does decline? What if 3 weeks from now it goes away? I mean, there's only been 1,500 cases, less than 100 deaths. He could look like a genius.
It could, and it probably will decline. But U.S. presidents lose elections when they look incompetent and when they look out of touch. And most recently, the two that probably that happened to was President Carter and George Herbert Walker Bush. He is vulnerable on both of those. They're not looking particularly competent on the, I would disagree with Mr. Black, on the virus so far. And his statement last night was very weak, and I think the market showed that today. He looks a little out of touch. Americans are very concerned about this, and he's looked a little cavalier to date.
The economy has taken down presidents, President Hoover for that matter. Will the economy take down Donald Trump?
It won't be any one thing. It's generally an accumulation of different factors, perhaps the biggest being his own outlandish behavior. I mean, he doesn't seem to have a grasp of the vernacular of the presidency. And we really saw that in his address to the nation on March 11th, when he essentially was reading from a teleprompter and just couldn't convey the necessary emotion and empathy that you come to expect from a president.
But isn't that a separate issue, how people feel about the president and how the president behaves versus how he's handling this crisis?
Well, he's handling it very poorly at the moment. Out of every 1 million Americans, exactly 5 have been tested. This problem is far greater in the United States than anyone realizes. It's probably going to be another few weeks before we realize the full magnitude. But there is already a sense that the administration made a very fundamental mistake in blocking flights from China. They thought the job was done when clearly it wasn't, and now they have a natural disaster.
But some people have said that that was the best thing that Donald Trump could have done at the time.
There are those who say that the blocking the flights from China actually was a great step to take to prevent it from spreading a lot faster.
It just wasn't enough.
It wasn't enough, but I mean, if you look around the world, what steps were enough, right? This virus is spreading pretty rapidly. I think for us, this is a snap in time, right? We're looking at this virus right now. The election's in November. There's a lot of months between now and November to see what happens here. I mean, Mr. Trump said yesterday or the day before that 6 months they'll have a vaccine. Hopefully within 3 months they can find some kind of like containment strategy or have it plateau a little bit. Moving forward to November, I'm not sure. This is a very serious issue, there's no question, but will this be the dominant issue going into November election?
I don't think it will be, but I think
really
Spider put his finger right on it, which is that Americans do not trust this president, and that is a very fundamental
I really
problem.
have to take exception to that. That is not the case. He has the support of scores of millions of people. He has enough support on all polls for the last 6 months to be reelected, higher support than he had in the polls coming right up to the election in 2016. You don't wash away quite so quickly the fact that he's eliminated 80% of the illegal migrant problem. He has presided over a full employment economy. There are now more jobs to fill. Now, this obviously could change if the public health crisis becomes entrenched and prolonged, but more jobs to fill than there are unemployed people. And he is actually the only leader of any serious jurisdiction in the world who's making any progress on the disparity of income problem. The lower 10% of income earners in the United States are advancing now on a percentage basis more quickly than the top 10%. And that is a real change and a real reform. And he will get some support for that, and he does in the polls as it is. On this particular crisis of the coronavirus, what he has to do is appear to be competent. There are people
That's very difficult for him in a lot of people's eyes, appearing to be competent. Really, I mean, it is. And as far as the immigration workers go, let me tell you something about the people in the agricultural business. They're hurting because of that, simply because Americans and Canadians are the same way. They have to bring in immigrants because our people simply won't do those jobs.
Yeah, but if you bring in people to do that, Spider,
yeah,
you have the problem that the working class of the United States has had for the last 20 years of their income not going up. If you're constantly bringing in unskilled labor who are technically at risk of being deported, you're not going to get any growth in the lower income sectors.
I can't disagree with you on that, Conrad. I'm just suggesting that, I mean, this man, the President of the United States, had illegal immigrants working for him at one time. I mean,
you're talking about the polls in the Trump Tower. That was 30 years ago.
All right, we need to take a short.
About
all right, we'll need to take a short break. We'll be right back.
Oh my God, this is fun.
He has a way of kind of motivating people to get to the ballot box. When I look at someone like Joe Biden, regardless of what you think of his policy, he's a very boring individual.
Welcome back. According to a survey conducted in the U.S. last year, Americans trust Democrats more than Republicans when it comes to health care. So the question is, will coronavirus make health care a defining issue in the 2020 campaign? And if so, could it hurt the Republicans? Dr. Tepper, I'll start with you.
What we have as a situation is this a Katrina moment for this president. We have to keep in mind two things. One is he's been distinctly underwater in terms of the popular perception. He's never risen much beyond 42%, 38 to 42%, but the economy has been very strong. Keep in mind in 2018, The blue wave, which crested, and that's the Democratic push, raised the total number of people coming to the polls. And what they wanted primarily was issues regarding healthcare and the climate.
This next U.S. election is going to be decided in about 6 or 8 states. And really, there's going to be 2 groups that are going to make the big decision. One is working class white men, and the other one is going to be suburban women. He is losing suburban women massively. The key question is, does he still hold with working men? And that is to be determined. And I think one of the reasons why he fears Joe Biden and would have preferred Senator Sanders, is because Biden does speak to that group, and that could be a difficult.
I don't know that he does fear Joe Biden.
He doesn't.
I think that
Joe Biden's an imbecile. He doesn't fear him at all.
Well, and he is on the record saying his biggest threat to re-election is the Federal Reserve, which is, you know.
Yeah, but they not now. They just cut their rates again today. Look, I revel in my minority status here, but I'm accustomed to it. And I am not a Trump whitewasher at all. I've known him for a long time, and I'm well aware of his foibles, including the less salubrious ones. But the facts are he's been an extremely effective president. And I disagree with Dr. Pepper on the popularity numbers. Rasmussen, which along with the University of Southern California, and you would know this, Bob, it was the only poll that got it right in 2016. They always have them at right around 50%. It is absolutely not Katrina. Some of you, or most of you, will remember George W. Bush went to New Orleans late. He said to his emergency assistance director, "You're doing a great job, Brownie." In fact, it was a shambles. Snipers were shooting at medevacs when they arrived. A quarter of the New Orleans Police Department simply deserted their posts, stealing their police cars to flee from the storm. It was a fiasco compounded by the incompetence of the federal government. Nothing like that is happening here. Shutting down the air traffic from Europe has got to be a plus point. On the close down to China, you guys sort of skated over the fact that your Democratic role models said it was racism and xenophobia for them to do it. They're not saying that now. The fact is, this is, as Dr. Fauci and the others on Pence's panel have said, a containable problem, relatively speaking. Obviously, there'll be some spread of it. But you know, if Trump does, compared to other countries, a competent job, it won't hurt him politically, and it will pass. The economy is strong.
When you look at H1N1, 60 million cases in the U.S., 230,000 hospitalizations, 12,000 deaths. Obama in power at the time, nobody said boo. No one blamed it on him. Meanwhile, there are New York Times journalists calling it Trump virus. On the other hand, Conrad Black has mentioned a couple things. Some of his successes, trade wars, have so far been somewhat of a success. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. Middle East isn't necessarily in flames because of it. Do you think that people are able to separate their personal opinions about the man from what's really going on? And with respect to what's going on, is that enough to really vote for Biden over?
I think a lot of it has to do with his character and the fact that there's just a lot of people that do not trust what's coming out of the White House. Maybe I'm talking to the wrong people, but just got back from a prison tour, and I was all over the United States and Canada, and I have a lot of relatives that live in the States, and they're not all Democrats, but they want this man out of the White House. They look at him as being incompetent. They don't trust him. But then many people just don't trust politicians anymore, anyhow, because they say things that they don't keep their word on.
I think, too, people get tired of the circus after a while. I think that's probably going to be potentially his Achilles heel. It's a circus almost every day. This is an exhausting presidency. And sometimes he is quite smart in terms of his communications, and sometimes he's not. But he's constantly in your face. And I think for some people, they grow tired of that, and they're looking for something that's perhaps a little bit more low-key, and I don't want to hear from you for a while, just do your job. I think that is his biggest risk.
I think there's a lot of people out there that want a politician that's real, right? There's always this talk that we want a politician that we can relate to, that we can talk to. Donald Trump, I mean, when he's tweeting, he's saying these things, right? There's no mistake about it. I think he has a way.
His Mike Bloomberg thing was hilarious.
No, so
I have to agree with you.
My point is he has a way of motivating people to, if you will, get out and cast ballots. I mean, look at 2016. There was no doubt everybody said he was going to lose. Everybody said he had no chance. His policy ideas were crazy and ridiculous, and he won the election. I think it's the same thing going into this. He has a way of kind of motivating people to get to the ballot box. When I look at someone like Joe Biden, regardless of what you think of his policy, he's a very boring individual. I'm not a Bernie Sanders fan, but when Bernie Sanders speaks, he inspires you to go do things, right? He inspires you to go cast that ballot. I think Joe Biden is a very boring politician, where Donald Trump, whether it's tweeting, whether it's being on a stage, whether it's at a rally, he has a way of communicating that mobilizes you to want to go on and support him.
But can you trust Joe Biden more than you trust Donald Trump?
So it's not I don't think it's a trust issue. I think it's to Mr. Black's point that if you view him as he has managed the economy very well, he has done things that have put America in a better position, you will go cast that ballot for him.
In terms of foreign affairs,
because
I don't think he has.
you're gonna see Biden tied to the Obama legacy, and if you are not happy with the Obama legacy, why would you go cast a ballot for Joe Biden?
All right, when we come back, the stage is set for Biden versus Trump. But can he defeat him? We'll see. That's next.
Trump is a president. He has his foibles, but he's done what he said he would do, and we have a full employment economy.
Welcome back. Once again, Democratic voters have shown a preference for the establishment favorite, Joe Biden, which means that at this point, Biden has all but won the nomination. The stage is set for Biden versus Trump, but can he win? I guess I'll put the question on the table. Is Biden the antidote for Trump?
Yeah, you've nailed it, which is to say he is the embodiment of stability. And you think back to the Canadian federal election of 2015, and you had Prime Minister Harper, who'd been there for 9 years. People fully expected him to be returned to office, and Canadians en masse chose something very different because they were very deliberate in their choice of wanting a difference of a style, of approach, and that's exactly what Americans are looking for now. And Joe Biden embodies stability, he embodies humility, and more than anything, he embodies empathy. 8 years as a member of the executive, 16 years as a member of the Congress. No one's going to decry his experience. You can call him an imbecile, but the truth is that he is a public servant.
Some have said actually he was a congressman for a senator for too long, and actually they only see him as a senator and not in a presidential light. Dr. Tepper.
Yes, the whole question of who can win is first and foremost deciding the primaries. And right now the decision has come down to Sanders versus Biden, and Biden, with no organization at all in many states, is cruising to a victory over Sanders, who's highly organized. So the party has decided that Biden is the one to face Donald Trump. Now, what about the polls? The polls suggest all along that almost any of the top contenders would defeat Donald Trump by 6 to 8 points. But in the toss-up states, and he's leading in all of those, the national polls in that regard. But if you look at those toss-up states, it is a toss-up still between Trump and Biden. The campaign is going to matter, and the campaign is now moving toward a virtual campaign. The mighty Trump rallies are not likely to be held, but they're not going to be held for anybody else either. And if you go to a virtual campaign, Trump has an edge because his media manager from his campaign is now his overall manager, and he's been working the Twitter and Facebook and the virtual side of the campaign, and I think that gives an edge to Donald Trump.
Oh, interesting. What do you think? Is Biden the antidote to Donald Trump?
In the dreams of most of the people I encounter, yes, but in fact, no. I don't want to be disrespectful of Joe Biden, but when he ran prior to being vice president, he had to withdraw in 1988 for plagiarizing from Neil Kinnock, of all people, one of the most unsuccessful party leaders in modern British history. He never got above 2% in any poll. He's still well remembered for the savage crucifixion he and Teddy Kennedy conducted of Robert Bork, who was a very great man. And he is essentially a nonentity. I mean, for that, he's a placeman, in Cromwellian terms, a decayed servitor. He is not getting away from the implications of the Ukraine affair, and that will be revived. And when we hear these reports of people suddenly voted for him, one, they didn't particularly vote for him. The powers that be in the Democratic Party decided they absolutely could not have a Marxist candidate who embraces open borders, 10th month abortions, and the whole panoply of giveaway programs including compulsory government-organized medical care that wrenches 180 million Americans away from the medical care they have now that they're happy with. They just couldn't have it. And Biden was the only alternative. Bloomberg bombed the debates and couldn't quite buy the election. And we all know the problems of the others. Pocahontas couldn't lie straight in bed. She had a plan for everything, and they all cost tens of trillions of dollars. It was a terribly disappointing campaign for the Democratic nomination. I just close this answer with reminding you that in the terrible year of 1968, with race riots and anti-war riots all around the country, 200 to 400 dead draftees coming back from Vietnam every week, assassinations of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy. At one time, rather, Lyndon Johnson, Hubert Humphrey, Robert Kennedy, Nelson Rockefeller, Richard Nixon, and Ronald Reagan were all running for president. Where are they now? Not this gang of Democrats. Trump is a president. He has his foibles, but he's done what he said he would do, and we have a full employment economy. He's revived nuclear non-proliferation after the 3 previous presidents gave it away to North Korea and Iran.
What I was saying is countries that were once our allies feel that he's not appreciating them. He's divided them. There are a lot of countries that Turkey, France, and other countries don't see him that way. But wait a minute, I just want to get about back here. They don't, you know, people, the average person are not deeply intellectual in politics as you are. And the working class people, they don't see Trump in the same light. I just believe that Joe Biden will beat this guy because they'll take anybody to get him out of there right now.
The only part, one point, I don't think people vote on foreign policy, so I don't think that's really relevant to the actual election. But to Mr. Black's point, I think there is something to be said about there are those in the Democratic Party that believe the establishment is taking this away from Bernie Sanders, and I'm very curious to see, going into the actual general election, how that plays out. I don't think we should be taking any of these votes for granted. I don't think we should think that the Democratic voters will come out and just support Biden because he's the candidate. So it's going to be very curious to see if this divided party actually...
Everywhere I go, there's a big push to bring out the minorities to get him out of there. And there are a lot of other people that were borderline, maybe progressive conservative people that were borderline are turning Democrat just to get him out of there. They've had enough of it. It's not that he hasn't did some good in there. It's the man himself.
All right, we need to take a short break. There's more on the other side. Stick with us.
A lot of what Donald did before he was president was absurd. As president, I think there's a real taste and behavior question here.
Welcome back. We've been talking about the 2020 U.S. presidential election and the fact that the identity of the Democratic nominee in all likelihood will be Joe Biden. Historically speaking, incumbent presidents usually win re-election. So what does that mean for the Democratic Party? Also, because it's Joe Biden, we've just come through a primary season. He is on the record taking some pretty progressive positions, and I think he felt he needed to at the time because he was running against Bernie Sanders. So he's on record, banning fracking, confiscating guns, open borders. Will these things hurt him? Could they hurt him in the general election?
I think there's a tradition on the part of those seeking the nomination to run in the particular direction of the party, and once they have the nomination, to return fairly quickly to the center. But I would like to come back to something Mr. Black referred to, which is the Bidens and the Ukraine affair, because I think a lot of Americans have come to the realization that A, the Russians did intervene in the 2016 election in a very significant way, and B, what led to Donald Trump's impeachment was the canard of somehow it was actually the Ukrainians intervening on behalf of the Democrats in 2016, something premised on a falsehood. And just like Donald Trump's record on birtherism and the racist claim that that Barack Obama was not born in the United States and was somehow illegitimate in his role as president of the United States. And these are the kinds of things that are driving Americans crazy. And they're also the kinds of things that have led to a massive turnout of new voters for Joe Biden. It's not, the Democratic establishment are suburban women, Black votes matter, and a lot of folks who take a look at Donald Trump and just say, enough.
I'm not sure Bernie's supporters are going to come out and support Biden. They didn't for Hillary.
I think their
you know what,
hatred of
though?
Trump is sufficient to drive them to the polls.
She did get 3 million more votes than he did last time.
That doesn't matter.
They ran an incompetent campaign. They didn't campaign in Wisconsin. They didn't campaign in Michigan. They barely campaigned in Minnesota. And that's what really did them in. So let's see if the Democrats get their act together. That will be the key thing here. If the Democrats get their act together, realize the mistakes that they've made, and spend money and campaign where they should have been campaigning, then he's in real trouble. If they don't, he'll get reelected.
I got to say the birther situation certainly didn't hurt Trump last election. He's still, I mean, and as far as Hillary Clinton goes, when you start to think, she was so villainized that there's no way. I never seen so much hatred towards that woman is watching this whole thing.
But Republicans spent hundreds of millions of dollars vilifying her over a decade. They haven't done that to Joe Biden, so they've got a short window to spend some money against him. So I think he's on a better footing than she is as a result of that.
No one wants to vilify Joe Biden. He's not a bad person.
No,
but, you know, I'll give you the Quebec expression, pas un chef. The man is not a leader. He could not lead the United States across the Brooklyn Bridge. He's perfectly adequate as a senator from Delaware, which is a population smaller than Etobicoke. But that's as far as it gets.
Conrad, do you actually think that Donald Trump is a good leader?
Yeah, I do. I want to say this on that subject. This idea that Trump is a boob won't fly. I mean, the fact is he achieved more prior to being inaugurated president than anyone in the history of that office except the founders of the country, Washington, Jefferson, and Madison, and the leaders of great armies to victory in just wars, Grant and Eisenhower.
You're historian. You're eating me alive. I don't like it.
But look, it's not easy to make billions of dollars in New York. It's not easy to say, right, I am going to become a television star.
But
here's my plan for the program.
How many bankruptcies along the way?
That's junk bond kingdom.
Well, no,
come on, it's Spider. That's junk bond stuff. That's the casino business.
He's not good at paying back his bills.
He did a brilliant job in his basic real estate business, and when he was underwater, he got everyone out whole and made it billions of dollars.
Shakir.
I'm not worried about his time in the casino business. I think ultimately in the presidency, you don't have to like his policies, but Mr. Trump is very decisive. He takes action. He puts his foot down and goes in a direction, and to me, that's good leadership. The outcomes we can debate over whether this is good or bad policy. We can have the discussion if you'd like, but there's no question.
Lead
Also,
by example in all
mind.
manners. This guy does not do that to me. But that's just that's just me. That's one of the reasons I would never vote for him.
But I want to separate our personal opinions about the man from what will actually take him down. The fact of the matter is, incumbent presidents usually win re-election, and the economy up until now has been solid. Dr. Tepper.
Yes. The elections are won by people who show up to vote. And the question of who can turn out the base, who will actually get their people to the polls, will ultimately determine this election, as it does all elections. The question whether the Democrats have now created a coalition of highly mobilized people who will get out to vote in more numbers and in the right states, in the right places for the Electoral College, is the big question. I'd like to mention just something mentioned in passing, Bloomberg. Bloomberg was a terrible candidate, but he ran a very good campaign. You have people who are willing to put all of their muscle, we're not sure about Sanders, into an organization that can turn out the vote, as they did in 2018, and increasing numbers of Democrats voted in this primary session. So as you opened up with, there's a lot of Republicans who have followed the president's lead that the virus situation wasn't serious when, evidence-based suggested it was. That suggests that Donald Trump's hold on his base is firm. Now we have to see who will show up in more numbers in the right places at the election time.
Final word.
two things that I think could bring him down: hubris, and the second thing that could bring him down is narrow casting. He's talking to the same people all the time, and he's not broadening his coalition enough.
All right, stick right there. When we come back, predictions for the 2020 general election. That's next.
I sometimes think of America as a very large party where there's a guy in the corner of the party and he's being obnoxious, he's spitting on people, and he's occasionally dropping his drawers, and he's the president.
Welcome back. There's still months to go until the first ballots are cast in the U.S. presidential election. Nevertheless, it is not too early to begin speculating about Donald Trump's chances of winning a second term. We've sort of done it, but, what do you think, Conrad? Will he win?
I think so. I think he's done what he said he would do. We've got full employment, no unemployment, and he's reduced the taxes of 83% of American taxpayers. Charles, on your point, not 1% of Americans think that the major issue in that impeachment was Ukraine's role in intervening in the 2016 election. I agree with you that the birther thing was absolutely absurd, but it was before he was president. A lot of what Donald did before he was president was absurd. As president, I agree with Spider. I think there's a real taste and behavior question here. I wish American presidents all looked and sounded like Franklin D. Roosevelt or John F. Kennedy, but that's Donald, and a lot of people like it. You're very familiar with the sports world. A lot of people, the Leo DeRocher, nice guys come last, in your face style, and that works for you. It doesn't work in Canada.
I met Donald Trump many times at fights, and he's a big fight fan. One-on-one, great guy.
Very nice man. Anyway, so I think that he will, because I think that he is a good executive who, I agree, had made an inelegant, discordant, slightly bumbling start on this virus. But I think it'll be clear to the public that his administration has got its arms around it and has done a very competitive job with other comparable countries in dealing with it. So I think he'll be all right.
Will he win?
I don't think he'll win. I was asked a question. Why does he appeal to some of these hate groups? There's something in that message that appeals to them, and I don't think he's going to win. I really think that people are getting together. They're going to get him out to vote. It's going to be a tough one, but it all depends on if unless Joe Biden fails and forgets himself every once in a while, like he does.
Well, that's a bit of a concern.
I'm the king of bad analogies, and I sometimes think of America as a very large party where there's a guy in the corner of the party and he's being obnoxious, he's spitting on people, and he's occasionally dropping his drawers, and he's the president, right? And that is what will bring down Donald Trump. His conduct is just so untoward the office of the presidency, and I think increasingly Americans realize it. On paper, strong economy, set aside coronavirus, set aside the disaster that markets have been over recent days. I mean, on paper, he actually has some things he can look at as direct successes. I mean, he's rebalanced trade with China to a large extent, something people have been trying to do for a long time. There is the withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal, which many people feel was quite appropriate, and yet his own conduct will be his own undoing.
And that is what the Democrats are going after. They are talking about his conduct. He's illegitimate, he's ill-fit to be president, and rather than going after, what he's done. What do you think?
I think ultimately when it gets to the election, it's about how people feel, right? If this coronavirus passes and the stock market is doing well and unemployment is low, people are feeling great going into that, I think Donald Trump wins. I also think there's a lot of Trump supporters who won't be public about their support, but going into that ballot, they'll cast a vote for Donald Trump. I say the same
Quietly,
same thing in 2016. I was in a few U.S. states prior to the election. There were a lot of folks who wouldn't be vocally public with their support for Trump, but they were Trump supporters, right? So I really think he has a lot of people who are just hiding in the closet right now, waiting to come out on Election Day to cast that ballot on his side. And to some of the points said earlier, I think he ran a campaign. He said he was going to do certain things, and he's done those things. I think that gives him a lot of credibility. Whether or not you like the policies, it gives him a lot of credibility going into the next election.
I think ultimately it comes down to, are people tired of the circus? If people are tired of the circus, then he'll be out. If they're not tired of the circus, and Joe Biden runs a even moderately competent campaign, he should be able
I
to
don't
win.
think it's a circus, right? Because you continue, I think there's a lot of folks who actually do think Mr. Trump is not treated fairly in the media. There's a lot of people who think that a lot of the attacks, because he came out and said he's not a fan of the media. They have a reason and incentive to attack him, and I think there's a lot of folks who look at Donald Trump and say, you've done a good job. We think some of the attacks coming at you are actually misguided, are not appropriate, and I think he has that support. Again,
It's Barnum and Bailey almost on a daily basis.
He's vilified the media, let's be clear. I mean, he's
And so
vilified
they
a
have-
fundamental institution of American democracy. But let me just quickly add
Not
one
more
thing.
than they deserve, Charles.
Oh, well, you would know, sir. You would know.
Dr. Tepper, let me bring you in here.
Yes. A few weeks ago, perhaps even less, it was a foregone conclusion that Donald Trump was going to get reelected because the economy was good. The Democrats were going to nominate an unelectable candidate. All of that has changed in a very short time. We are still a long way away from the election. If the situation, as we see today, shows that Biden, who is now the likely nominee, he can put together a very plausible campaign. We don't know how the economy is going to go. We don't know what the virus is going to do, but we do know that now it is going to be a two-person campaign. We aren't sure how, I'm not going to predict how it's going to come out, but we do know it's certainly possible that the Democrats will put together a coalition which will bring up enough people to the polls to overcome the built-in advantage of the president with his supporters and with a good economy.
Yeah, well, yeah. I think the one thing that Democrats really fear is if Donald Trump suddenly, unexpectedly, starts acting presidential, which we've seen like very, very brief glimpses of. His speech in the 75th anniversary of the Normandy invasion was arguably one of the finer speeches I've seen him give, and that's a
quoted
very,
Roosevelt.
very short list.
Okay, when we come back, final thoughts from our panelists. That's nice.
Don't forget, for free tickets to the show, go to www.universe.com and search Zoomer Media and log on to www.thezoomertv.com for full episodes and more.
Welcome back to the Zoomer. It's time for final thoughts from our panelists. We'll start to my left.
Okay, I think that if he can handle this coronavirus and things work out, but the way it is now, I mean, people are being closed out of their jobs, which means they're not spending money. The economy goes down. But if they can figure this whole coronavirus thing out, and hopefully they will, he's got a shot. Whether I like him or not, he's got a shot.
I think if the Democrats can get their act together, and that's always a big if, they've got a very good chance of winning this, probably holding the House. I think the Republicans continue to hold the Senate, but they have a very good chance. But it'll require some discipline and some organization and some proper outreach to make sure that they have a big enough tent.
There's a lot of talk about how polarized America is at the moment. And in fact, the history of America has seen moments of extreme polarization, whether it was Vietnam, whether it was America's decision to enter the Second World War, the classic example of the United States Civil War. This is one of those moments, and there's a fundamental decision to be made by Americans, which is, are we comfortable with what we've become under Donald Trump, or will we seek another path forward, which is much more empathetic, much more based around conciliation, and the hope that the partisan poison can finally be eradicated.
Dr. Tepper.
America is a strong and vital, experienced, mature democracy. It is polarized. There is no reason to think that polarization is going to disappear with a single election or with a single crisis, that is the virus or some external crisis. But this election is indeed pivotal in terms of the future of America's democracy, as everyone is putting it out in America. America is being told that they have to make a choice between a Donald Trump type presidency and type America, or back to something like, and this is what Biden's appeal is, civility and prudence in office. That's a choice only the Americans can make. America has survived, as you've just heard, much more serious crises. But this is the crisis of our moment. This is the crisis only the American voting public will decide.
I agree this is a crisis of our time. Mr. Trump will be making a lot of decisions around this, but he has very smart people behind him who are experts, who are leaders in the field. So I think this will be taken care of. This is a snap in history. As we move forward 8 months from now to the US election, I think Mr. Trump will be in a very strong position. I think he has a strong record to run on. I'm not so sure that the hardcore supporters are going to turn their back on him. And like I said earlier, I think there are those Trump supporters who are not going to be public about their support, but will turn out and say, we'll give this guy 4 more years.
I look at it from the standpoint of taking the Trump era as a whole. The years between Reagan and Trump were on balance, or the 20 years prior to Trump anyway, were on balance the worst period of presidential misgovernment, both parties and including the Congress, in the history of the country. Worse than the 10 years before the Civil War and worse than the years between Wilson and Roosevelt. And terrible things happened. I don't need to recount them. The economic disaster, the disaster in the Middle East, the endless war, and so on. And Trump attacked all factions of both parties. He attacked the election financing system. He attacked the national political media. He attacked the entire political class. And he's sort of halfway through what he promised to do. And I think he's done well and will be enabled to continue and finish the job as long as he doesn't botch this crisis. Now, what he has to do is convince Americans that despite an awkward start, which I agree with those who've said it, he has managed the coronavirus crisis properly, and America's performance is highly competitive with other countries. And as of now, it is. It's better than the Western European countries, and certainly better than the Far Eastern ones. And so I think his chances are good. But I want to agree with Dr. Pepper. I mean, you can't discount either party. In the United States, not like Canada. Both sides come to bat. It's not, you liberals win 5 out of 6 elections. That's not how it works in the U.S. And the pattern is 2 terms for each party. And it was only broken, as you said, when Carter was clearly not up to it. And George Bush allowed that charlatan Ross Perot to steal 20 million Republican votes. So I think you favor Trump, but it could go, the Democrats can always win.
All right. Well, that's all the time we have here at the panel. Big thank you to my panelists. We'll see you soon. For now, it's time to zoom out.